My name is Emma Collins. I grew up in a small house with a white porch and a maple tree in the front yard. My dad, Mark, worked long hours at the bank. My mom, Karen, taught at the elementary school down the street. I have a younger sister, Lily. Lily loved glitter, unicorns, and being the center of attention. People called our family perfect because Mom always smiled at school events and Dad wore neat shirts to work. They posted family photos on Sundays. Neighbors waved. Teachers complimented us. From outside, our life looked shiny and calm. The night they canceled my 18th birthday, I stood in my room and counted the holes in the ceiling. I had planned this party for months. I wanted simple things: pizza, my friends, a playlist with songs I loved, and maybe one dress that made me feel like I could breathe. I had sent the invites, written the playlist, and saved money for a tiny cake. I thought it would be soft and warm, like the last night of summer. Instead, it turned into something sharp. It happened in the living room. Lily was sitting on the couch with her feet tucked up under her, and she was crying because Mom wouldn't buy the expensive doll she wanted. Mom said, "Not right now, Lily. We'll talk about it next week." Lily's face changed like a storm. She slammed her hand on the coffee table. She screamed that no one loved her. She screamed that Emma's birthday was stupid and selfish and that she should get everything because she was the baby. Mom put her hand over Lily's mouth. Dad tried to calm things down, but Lily kept screaming until Mom's calm voice broke. "Fine," Mom said suddenly. "No party. We will not throw a party while our child is upset." There it was. A single sentence that felt like a slap. They weren't listening to the plans I had made. They were listening to a cry. I remember the cold that came over me in that instant. I had spent months saving up for one small night, and they canceled it because my sister threw a tantrum. Not because anything serious had happened. Not because someone was sick. Not because money was gone. Because Lily wanted a toy, and she screamed loud enough to drown out my life. I didn't shout. I didn't break plates. I packed one bag. I shoved my favorite hoodie, the playlist on my phone, a notebook with my handwriting, and a photograph of my grandmother into it. I left a note on the kitchen table that read, "I'm tired of being quiet. I am moving out. Don't try to stop me." Then I walked to my car, locked the door, and drove to the small apartment I had found 2 weeks earlier. I had applied for a job at a coffee shop, and my manager had agreed to start me on Monday. I slept on an air mattress that night, with the window cracked and the city sounds like a soft, living thing around me. I did not tell anyone where I was. I did not call. I just sat with my playlist and cried until my throat hurt. I wanted revenge, but I did not want to hurt anyone. I wanted them to feel the loss of my quiet presence, the small things I always did that made the house run smoothly. I wanted them to understand what it felt like when someone disappears from a life you thought couldn't go on without them. I wanted them to notice the empty chair at the table and to feel the guilt in the corners of the house. But I could not say any of that out loud. Instead, I chose to move out quietly. I folded my life into a bag and left. For the first week, I worked long hours at the coffee shop. I learned how to steam milk without burning it and how to remember names so people felt seen. My apartment was tiny and smelled faintly of bleach from the cleaner the landlord used. I bought cheap curtains and learned to cook pasta without sauce. I made friends at work. They joked that I was too nice and that I had the family voice that told people when to laugh in the right place. Those small compliments were like a bandage on the open wound in my chest. I checked my phone only a little. I wanted to see if my parents would call. They didn't. No messages, no missed calls. The silence became another kind of thing I had to learn to breathe with. At night, I would read the old book my grandmother left me. Her letters were tucked between pages, and she wrote that life is messy and that kindness is a quiet superpower. I held that note like a talisman. After 2 weeks, I started leaving small notes around the house. I meant to put one on the kitchen table, but the house seemed stranger without me. The mail sat in the box. The maple tree's leaves were turning red. A neighbor walked by and asked if I was okay. I said yes and watched him walk away. It was strange to hide in plain sight. Strangers did not know my story. My family did not know my address. I wanted them to learn that the perfect life could break into pieces without me. Then I started watching. Not in a creepy way, like a stranger outside their window. I followed small news alerts on my phone. I watched social media. I kept my friend Jake updated because he promised to text me with any changes. I had 2 rules: keep distance and never post anything about what I was doing. I wanted their fall to be a slow one, a winter that started with little cracks. I wanted them to face the consequences of always choosing the loudest voice. At first, the cracks seemed small. Mom posted a photo of Lily blowing out a candle at a school party. Dad posted a picture of a weekend fishing outing. They kept up the outside show. That made me angry and also strange, like part of me wanted to run back and fix everything, to say, I am here. But I held back. I remembered the note I left and the soft voice of my grandmother telling me to be patient. If I wanted them to feel something real, it had to be real and not planned. A few weeks later, Lily came home from school with a scraped knee and a new attitude. Mom fussed over her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Dad took off work to take her to the park. They were gentle with her, but they were not gentle with me. No one called to check if I had eaten. No one asked if I needed help. It was like I had become invisible overnight. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. My stomach dropped. It was Dad. He wrote, Emma, where are you? Call me. I stared at the message and felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Relief that they were thinking of me. Anger that it took them this long. I did not call. I replied instead with a single line, I moved out. Don't try to find me. I need space. Dad's reply came quick. Come home. We can fix this. I stared at the text and laughed like a small, sad animal. Fix this? Fix what? The button on the apartment phone glowed, and I switched off my screen. I did not go back. Then, one night, something happened that I did not expect. I sat on my tiny balcony, wrapped in an old blanket, and watched the streetlights. A car pulled into my building's parking lot, and the driver left it idling for a long time. I thought nothing of it until the next morning when my neighbor told me that Mrs. Carter from across the hall had seen a woman crying in the lobby late the night before. The mystery woman left before dawn. I did not think about it more. On a Tuesday, I got a video from Jake. He filmed from inside his car while parked across the street from my parent house. It showed Mom and Dad in the kitchen. Mom looked tired. Dad paced. Lily stood by the table, quiet. The video lasted a minute. At the end, Mom suddenly clutched her chest and gasped. She dropped to the floor. Dad shouted for help. I froze. My chest dropped down to my toes. I ran out of my apartment without shoes. I did not drive. I could not. I ran to the bus stop and took the first bus I could. People looked at me with blank faces. I didn't care. At the hospital, I sat in the waiting room with my hands trembling. I thought about the note I had left and the dinner table with the empty chair. I thought about how quickly life could tilt on its axis. Mom was fine. The doctors said it was a panic attack and dehydration. She had fainted because she hadn't been sleeping. She had been trying to keep everything together at home and at work. I wanted to feel relief. But my anger had not vanished. I had moved out because they canceled my birthday. I wanted them to feel the loss of the things I did, the quiet fixes and the soft routine. But seeing my mom on the hospital bed, pale and trembling, made me feel something else. Guilt walked through me like a slow shadow. I left the hospital before they woke her. I did not want to be the daughter who abandoned her mother while she healed. I wanted to be the daughter who watched her family wallow in consequences. I wanted to be the daughter who could say, I tried to leave, and you let me. My heart hurt in a new way. I ate a sandwich on the curb and cried into it until my face was salty and messy. For the next month, their life began to show more cracks. Dad missed days at work because Lily had colds. Mom came home late and cried in the shower. They fought about money and whether buying Lily the doll would have saved the night. The neighbors started to whisper. A parent from Lily's class called to see why Mrs. Collins looked upset at the school recital. Someone at church left a note that said, If you need help, let us know. My parents never answered those notes. They always smiled at the school, and then locked the door and sat in silence. I watched all this unfold from a distance. I paid my rent. I learned to balance a checkbook. I even bought a small plant and kept it alive. But I also sent anonymous notes to the house. I would slip a folded letter under their door that said small things. You are missed at dinner. We are stronger together. I hoped those notes would make them think. I did not want to punish them forever. I wanted them to learn empathy and kindness. I wanted them to see how their choices had small, sharp edges that cut people who loved them. The small events kept happening. Lily broke her phone and blamed the cat. Dad lost his wallet at the grocery store. Mom forgot to pick up Lily from dance practice. The small, ordinary messes piled up like dust. Each problem seemed to wobble that sense of perfection. They started going to therapy. I watched their posts about family work and finding our footing. They posted a picture of the three of them at a counseling office and wrote something about healing. I wanted to believe them. I really did. But trust had broken like cheap glass, and even if they glued it back together, I could still see the cracks. Then came the extreme event that ended the week like a thunderclap. One evening, I was at work. It was late, and the rain was loud on the coffee shop windows. The shop was empty. I was mopping the floor when my manager handed me his phone. He looked like he had seen a ghost. The screen showed a news alert. Major car crash on Route 7 involving a family of 3. The brief line said the car had flipped and there were injuries. My hands went numb. I asked him for the details, but he only shook his head and said the channel would update soon. I ran outside into the rain. My phone buzzed. It was Jake. He texted, "I'm at your parents' house. There are police cars and an ambulance." "I'm so sorry." I don't know more. I felt the world tilt dangerously, like the time a snow globe falls and the water sloshes out. I wanted to call my parents. I wanted to know they were okay. I wanted to run to that house and fix everything. But inside me, a small voice said, "You left. Now you see the price." I sprinted to the bus, soaked through, and clung to the poles as the bus swayed. People stared. A little boy held his mother's hand and asked why I was crying. I didn't know how to answer him. I thought about how this was the extreme moment the chapter needed to end on, the thing that would make the readers gasp and wait. It felt like the world paused. When I reached the scene, the police had set up cones and lights. People stood on the sidewalks with their umbrellas. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, met my eyes and shook her head. She mouthed, "Come inside." I moved through the crowd like a ghost. The air smelled of wet asphalt and fear. I didn't yet know who was hurt or how badly. All I knew was that the perfect life I had left might be breaking in a way I could not control. I stood at the edge and watched the stretcher covered by a white sheet being carried into an ambulance. I could not tell whose body lay beneath. I wanted to run forward and peel back the sheet, but I knew better than that. The sirens wailed, and the rain seemed to drum faster. My legs trembled. My heart pounded like a drum in a parade. The crowd kept a distance. The officers whispered into radios. A man in a suit kept directing people away. I pressed my hands to my face and felt the rain slide over my fingers. This is where my first chapter ends. The cars hummed. The lights flashed. I stood there, soaked and alone, and everything I had done to leave was suddenly small and fragile next to the sound of those sirens. I wanted to be brave and sure and cold. But inside, I felt only a big, empty question. What had I started by walking away? The answer would come later, in pieces like broken glass. But in that wet, electric moment, I could only watch and wait. The rain was still coming down when I reached the edge of the street. The flashing lights painted the wet pavement in red and blue, and the crowd stood like statues under umbrellas. My shoes squished, and my hair was plastered to my cheeks. I could not tell which ambulance had the family inside. My legs felt empty, like someone had taken the strength out of them. An officer stopped me with a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Do you have a relation here?" he asked. His voice was soft, but it held that official tone that makes you feel small. I nodded. "That's my house," I said. I wanted to yell, I had to tell them something, but my throat was thick. He asked for my name and for the number at which I could be reached. I gave it, my fingers trembling. He asked if I could identify anyone, and I thought about the photo of my mother on the mantel and my sister's small sneakers by the door. I thought about the note I had left on the kitchen table. I said nothing about that. They let me stay back with a few other neighbors. People whispered and exchanged looks, but no one knew the whole story. Jake found me and wrapped his jacket around my shoulders. He did not ask why I had left. He only said, "I'm here." That was all I needed for the moment. We watched as stretcher after stretcher moved toward the trucks. I tried to breathe, but each breath felt like a small, heavy stone. Later, a man in a suit with a notepad asked for my name again. He said his name was Detective Harris. His voice was kind, but his eyes were sharp, like he wanted details that fit into a puzzle. "Do you live there?" he asked. I thought about saying yes and walking back into the house that was suddenly a stranger. I thought about going in and making tea like nothing had happened. Instead, I told him the truth. "No," I said. "I moved out 2 weeks ago." He wrote it down and looked up at me as if he was waiting for an explanation. I gave him none. They did not let anyone into the house that night. The police tape made a square around the driveway, and a coroner's blanket covered something I could not see. People in the crowd sobbed quietly. Someone called my name and told me that my parents were on their way to the hospital. My heart jumped, and I ran with them. No bus now, only footsteps and a pulse in my ears. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and paper. The waiting room was full of people who looked like they had been waiting forever. I sat on a plastic chair that dug into my hip. Jake sat beside me and held my hand like a lifeline. A nurse came out and gave an update. "We have 3 people in trauma," she said. "We're doing everything we can." Her voice was steady, but it felt like a long, slow rope pulling me towards something I could not control. Time stretched thin. My phone buzzed with messages. Friends asked if I was okay. A few asked if they should come. I told them not to. I needed space to think, to hold the small, dangerous thing I had done. I whispered to myself that they had chosen Lily over me, that they had canceled my birthday without a thought. I knew the anger that had led me to move out. Sharp, clean, full of meaning. But the hospital waiting room made that anger fade into a fog of fear. When the doctor finally came out, he looked tired. His eyes were kind. He said, "Mrs. Collins is stable. She had a serious panic attack and fainted. We're keeping her for observation. Mr. Collins is being treated for fractures and a head injury. He's in surgery now. The child, we are stabilizing her." The doctor paused, then added, "We will update you as soon as we can." That pause felt like a small, cold knife. I did not know which words to hope for. I did not know what to want. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Dad's number. My fingers turned over it, and I stared at the screen. The message read, "Emma, where are you? Call me." My stomach turned. I had told him I moved out. I had written that note on the table. I had wanted them to feel the space. But that message felt small, as if nothing of what had happened had registered in his words. I did not reply. Instead, I walked the hospital halls until the tiles blurred under my feet. Each step brought a memory. Lily playing with my hair as a child, Mom packing my lunches with notes tucked inside, Dad teaching me to ride a bike. Those simple things felt like they belonged to a different world. I wanted to go back and pick them up and put them in a box labeled, "Never to be broken." But I could not. I had made a choice, and I had to live with it. At night, my phone lit up with calls from unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail. One was a neighbor asking if I wanted tea. One was a number labeled unknown, hospital. The next morning, the news said the family was in a crash, but it did not name them. The small-town comments started, prayers, speculation, questions. Social posts bloomed like mushrooms after rain. People made assumptions. People were ready to fill the silence with their own stories. A less loud, less scary thing happened in the middle of all this. I started to receive letters. Not texts, not calls. Paper letters slipped under my door in my apartment. They were folded small and written in my mother's careful hand. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then I unfolded the paper. The first letter said, "Emma, we are at the hospital and we are scared. Please come if you can. The second said, We are sorry for the night we ruined. We didn't know how much it meant. The next was shorter. We miss you. I read those letters in the dark, and my heart did something that felt like breaking and mending at the same time. The words were gentle, the handwriting shaky. My mother's letters were like tiny boats floating to me through a storm. I wanted to let them dock. I wanted to run straight into the hospital and collapse at her feet. But part of me still held like a small slate wall. This was my quiet revenge, I told myself. I had wanted them to feel my absence. If I showed up now, would it all fall apart again? Would they turn back into the family that always chose the loudest voice? In the days that followed, the town's whispers grew. Lily's classmates asked questions at school. A teacher sent a private message asking if I was coming to pick up Lily's things from the house. My mother's colleagues brought food to the school office and left it on a table with sticky notes that said, We care. The church started a fundraiser. People said things on social media, some kind, some cruel. But the family still kept the public face. They posted a black and white photo of the three of them together at the church, with a caption that said, Thank you for your prayers. It looked like a staged picture, the kind you take when you're trying to convince the world you are okay. I try to keep my life together in small ways. I worked my shifts. I learned to make the right cup of coffee for the regulars. I shelled peas for dinner and hummed to myself until the kitchen felt like mine again. I watered my plant and put a note in its pot that said, Grow. Those small acts felt like permission to live. But they also felt guilty, like I was building a life next to a house full of broken things. Then something strange happened. A letter arrived that was not from my mother. It was from someone named Mrs. Alvarez, who lived across the street from our old house. She wrote about small things she had seen. A man in a dark jacket taking photos of the house, Lily sitting by the window and staring at nothing, Dad missing church. Her words were kind, but edged with worry. She asked me to come home and help if I could. She did not know I had moved out. She did not know I had packed my life into a bag and left. Her letter felt like an invitation and a test. I thought about going back then. I imagined walking through the front door and seeing the empty place where I always sat at dinner. I imagined the house noticing me and the lights turning on in its heart. I imagined my mother standing at the sink, water running, and looking up with eyes that would finally see me. The picture was warm and bright and dangerous. I could feel my feet wanting to move. But then one afternoon the detective called me. He asked if I would come in to answer some questions. It's about the crash, he said. We're trying to make sure we have everyone's stories. I agreed. I told myself I would go and keep my story small and true. I would not tell him about the notes I had left under their door. I would not tell him about the relief I had felt when they canceled my birthday. I would only say what he needed to know. Sitting in the interview room felt like being under a bright lamp. Detective Harris asked gentle things at first, where I was when the crash happened, what I knew about their plans that day. I kept my answers short. Then, he asked a question I hadn't expected. Has anyone approached you about the crash? Anyone offering money or threats? Anything unusual you've seen around the house? He looked at me like he wanted me to help put together a larger picture. I thought about the man Mrs. Alvarez had mentioned taking photos. I thought about the woman crying in our building lobby. I thought about how suddenly a private life could get public. I told the detective about the man in the jacket, about the car that idled outside my building at night, about the woman in the lobby. He wrote it down, and his face changed a little. We'll follow up, he said. Thank you. His voice was polite, but it had that weight that suggested other things were happening, something bigger than a bad night. That night, I lay awake and read my mother's letters again. I read the part where she wrote, "We're sorry," and then I read my own handwriting on the note I had left. I'm tired of being quiet. I am moving out. Don't try to stop me. The two pieces of paper felt like holding two versions of myself. Which one was the truer Emma? The one who left to teach them a lesson, or the one who sat in the hospital and wept for the woman who had raised her? I decided to sleep. I closed my eyes and tried to think of the maple tree back home. I thought of the way leaves fell, like quiet applause in the yard. I thought about the sound of my grandmother's laugh in a kitchen full of light. I promised myself I would go to the hospital the next day, just to see. Not to fix, not to forgive, but to see. I wanted to be sure what I felt was real. At 2 in the morning, a sharp knock rattled my apartment door. It was a sound that made the floor vibrate under my feet. I sat up so fast my heart flew into my throat. The knock came again, harder this time, like someone who would not be denied. I glanced at the clock.
2.
My phone lay on the nightstand, dark and thick with silence. I hesitated, then went to the door and looked through the peephole. Shadows hunched beneath the dim hallway light. I could not see faces clearly. My breath came quick. The knocking turned into a heavy pounding. I looked back at the bed, at the letters on the desk, at the plant that stood like a small sentinel. My hands shook. I put my ear to the door and listened. Voices murmured on the other side, low, steady, a language of authority. I had a plan to keep my distance. I had rules about how far I would go. But now the rules were being tested. I pressed my hand to the knob, feeling the cold metal, and realized I did not know what would happen if I opened the door. Part of me wanted to scream, to say I left and that this was my life now. Another part wanted to run back into the hall and disappear into the night. The pounding stopped as if someone had pulled a curtain. Then, a voice I did not recognize called out in a calm, serious tone. Emma Collins. We need to speak with you. Please open the door. The name sounded like an echo in a cave. My heart pounded so loud, I thought the neighbors must hear it. I had not expected this. I had not expected the police to come to my door, to bring their questions, their notepads, their serious faces. My hand trembled over the knob. I thought of my mother's letters, of the detective's questions, of the photos of the house in the rain. I thought about the way the town was full of people ready to fix the silence with their own stories. Then I took a breath and reached for the door. The chapter ends there, with my hand on the knob and the streetlights outside humming like distant stars. The sound of rain was a thin drum on the windows. Outside, heavy footsteps shuffled as voices waited. My whole life felt like a slow-breathing animal, ready to leap. I did not open the door yet. I stood very still and listened to the sounds of the night. My hand stayed frozen on the doorknob. The hallway was quiet now, but I could still hear the low hum of voices behind the door, steady, patient, like they knew I wasn't going anywhere. My heart beat so loudly it felt like it filled the whole room. I wanted to run. I wanted to pretend I wasn't home. I wanted to curl up under my blanket and make everything go away. But nothing was going away. Emma Collins, the voice said again through the door, calm but firm. We're not here to hurt you. We just need to speak with you. I swallowed hard. The apartment felt small, like the air had thickened. My mother's letters sat on my desk. The plant leaned toward the window. My shoes were still wet from the rain. For a moment, I wished I was back in my old room with the maple tree outside my window and the air smelling like laundry detergent and cinnamon. But that life had cracked open the night they canceled my birthday. That life had split in two. I turned the knob slowly. 2 officers stood outside. A woman with a dark ponytail and kind eyes, and a man who looked tired but alert. Behind them stood Detective Harris, hands in his coat pockets, his eyes sharp as ever. Emma, he said gently, may we come in? My throat felt tight. Why? I asked. The woman officer stepped forward. We need to clarify a few details about the accident. And there are some developments we need you to be aware of. My stomach dropped. Are my parents okay? I whispered. The detective's eyes softened. We'll talk inside. I stepped back and let them in. My apartment suddenly felt too small for 3 officers. They looked around, not judging, just observing, and I wrapped my arms around myself, waiting for the blow. The female officer gave me a warm nod. I'm Officer Daniels. This is Officer Howell. We've been assisting Detective Harris on your family's case. Case? I echoed. Shouldn't this just be an accident? The detective studied me for a long second, then said quietly, That's what we're here to talk about. My knees felt weak, so I sat on the chair by my tiny kitchen table. The officers remained standing, their presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Detective Harris stepped closer and rested his notebook on the counter. The crash wasn't random. he said slowly. We're looking into the possibility that someone tampered with your father's car. The room tilted. My breath hitched. Tampered? What does that mean? Officer Howell answered. The brake lines. They were damaged. I felt the air leave my body. My vision blurred at the edges. No, that's not possible. My dad keeps the car in the garage. He's careful. He double-checks everything. We know, Detective Harris said softly. That's why it stands out. I covered my face with my hands. The officers waited, giving me space to breathe. When I finally lowered my hands, the detective continued. You mentioned a man taking photos of the house, he said, and a car idling outside your apartment, and a woman crying in your lobby. He paused. We believe these incidents might be connected. Connected. The word echoed through my skull like footsteps down a long hallway. But why? I whispered. We're just normal people. We're not rich. We're not political. We're not. Sometimes, Officer Daniels said, accidents aren't about money or status. Sometimes they're personal. My heart picked up speed. Personal? But who would? The detective held up a hand. We don't want to scare you, but we need to ask, have you seen anyone suspicious following you? Anyone trying to contact you? I shook my head quickly. No. Just those small things. The car. The woman in the lobby. The guy with the camera. But I thought that was all just weird coincidences. Officer Howell exchanged a look with Daniels. Emma, he said slowly, we think someone has been watching your family for a while. My skin prickled. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to calm the shaking. Is this because I left? My voice cracked. Did something happen because of me? No, the detective said firmly. None of this is your fault. But his eyes flickered in a way that made my stomach sink. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow morning, he said. We want you to look at a few photographs. See if you recognize anyone you've seen around the house or your building. I nodded numbly. And Emma, Officer Daniels added, her voice soft as a blanket. For now, keep your doors locked. Don't go anywhere alone. And if you notice anything strange, even something small, call us. Am I in danger? I whispered. The three of them exchanged a quiet, tense glance. Detective Harris answered. We don't know yet. That wasn't comforting. After they left, the apartment felt colder. I locked the door, checked the window, then checked the lock again. My hands would not stop trembling. I tried to sleep, but every shadow felt like a person. Every car sound outside made my heart jump. At 3 a.m, I sat in the kitchen sipping cold water, staring at my mother's letters. I miss you, one of them said. She had no idea what storm was surrounding the house, while she apologized. She had no idea how close everything was to breaking completely. By sunrise, my chest felt tight from no sleep and too much fear. I put on a hoodie and went to work early, thinking maybe the noise of the coffee shop would distract me. It didn't. I dropped cups. I spilled milk. I messed up orders. My manager tried to joke with me, but my mind was only on the crash, the brake lines, the mysterious people, and the look the detective gave me when he said they didn't know if I was safe. After my shift ended, I sat outside the shop with my head in my hands. The sun was bright and warm, but my body felt cold. Then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. I frowned and opened it. The text said, "You should have stayed home." Every drop of blood in my body seemed to sink into my shoes. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I looked around the street, searching for someone watching me, someone holding a phone, someone who knew where I was, but faces blurred in the crowd. Everyone looked normal. Everyone looked wrong. Another text buzzed. Now everything is falling apart. Hope you're happy. My breath turned shallow. Another buzz. We're not done. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the pavement. Cars passed. People walked. Life moved around me like nothing was happening. But something had shifted. Something dangerous and close, and crawling into my life like smoke under a door. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers. Then, slowly, dread crawling up my spine. I turned around. And that's when I saw someone standing across the street, half hidden behind a parked car. Black jacket, hood up, staring directly at me. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. The moment our eyes met, whoever it was stepped back out of sight. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was no accident. The crash, the photos, the woman crying, the officers at my door, the text messages. Someone was targeting my family. And now they were targeting me. I backed away from the street, breath shaking, pulse pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't know who the person was. I didn't know what they wanted. But I knew one thing. This was the new extreme event. And the next chapter would begin with me running for my life. I didn't run at first. I froze. My body refused to move, as if my brain had suddenly forgotten how legs worked. The world around me blurred. The sound of cars, the chatter of people, the clinking of coffee cups behind me. Everything felt muffled, like I was trapped underwater. The person in the black hood stepped back behind the car until only the edge of their jacket was visible. Watching. Waiting. I finally jolted back into myself and stumbled toward the coffee shop door, yanking it open so hard the bell above it scraped against the metal frame. My manager looked up from the counter, surprised. "Emma? You okay?" he asked. I shook my head because I didn't trust my voice. My throat felt like it had closed up. I grabbed my bag from the staff shelf and rushed into the back room. My hands trembled as I tried to dial 911, but I kept pressing the wrong buttons. My breath came too fast and shallow. When the call finally rang, I pressed the phone to my ear, trying to steady my voice. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" I think someone is stalking me," I whispered. "Please, can someone come? Please?" The operator asked me to stay inside, stay calm, and wait for an officer. I hung up and stayed where I was, back pressed to the wall, trying to breathe. My manager peeked through the door and frowned, but I waved him away. I didn't want to explain anything. I didn't want to say the words out loud. It took 10 minutes for officers to arrive. They were kind, gentle, understanding. They walked me outside, checked the street, asked if I could identify anyone. But of course I couldn't. The hood hid the person's face. The jacket hid their shape. They were smart. Careful. They could be anyone. The officers offered to escort me home, but I couldn't go home. The apartment suddenly felt too exposed, too easy to find. My hand shook so badly, I dropped my keys twice. Jake came to pick me up from the shop. When he saw my face, he didn't even ask questions. He just opened the car door for me and told me to breathe. We sat parked outside my building for 5 minutes before I worked up the courage to go upstairs. I checked every corner, every closet, every shadow. For the first time since moving out, I regretted not having family nearby. My space, once peaceful, now felt like a glass box someone could tap on from the outside. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made my heart jump. Every creak in the walls felt like footsteps. Every car door outside felt like someone coming for me. Around 3 a.m., I sat on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the front door. My eyes were dry from crying earlier. My head throbbed. I kept telling myself everything would make sense soon. That the detective would find something. That the messages were a cruel prank. That the hooded figure was just some random person. But deep down, I knew better. This was connected to my family. The crash wasn't random. The messages weren't random. And when I left home quietly after they canceled my birthday, I must have walked away at the exact wrong moment. Someone had been watching all along. Morning came slowly. My phone buzzed with a message from Detective Harris. "Emergency meeting. Come to the station as soon as you wake. We have updates. Please do not come alone." My stomach flipped. I called Jake. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm on my way," he said before I even explained anything. The drive to the station felt endless. The sun glared through the windshield, too bright for how dark the world felt inside me. Jake didn't talk much. He kept glancing at me like he was afraid I might disappear. When we got there, Detective Harris ushered me into a room I'd never been in before. It wasn't the warm interview room from last time. This one felt colder, more official. A metal table sat in the middle. A camera in the corner blinked slowly, like an eye that never slept. Officer Daniels sat on the opposite side, her face serious. There were photographs on the table, but they were flipped upside down. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Emma, Detective Harris said as he took a seat. Thank you for coming in. We have very concerning information. My chest tightened. Are my parents okay? Officer Daniels cleared her throat gently. They're stable. Your mother is awake. Your father is still in recovery. Lily has a few injuries, but she's expected to heal. I exhaled slowly. But the detective continued. We have reason to believe the crash wasn't meant for all of them. Silence. Long, heavy silence. My pulse thudded in my ears. What do you mean? Detective Harris looked me in the eyes. We think the person responsible was targeting someone specific in your family. My throat tightened. My dad? I asked. He shook his head. My mom? Another shake. My heart dropped. Lily. He didn't move. Then he whispered. No. Emma, they were targeting you. Everything inside me froze. Me. The room tilted. My vision blurred. I sank back in my chair. Why would someone? The detective slid the first photo toward me, flipping it over. It showed the back of my head, taken from behind a tree, in my apartment parking lot. Oh my God. I breathed, covering my mouth. Officer Daniels slid another photo. Me, walking out of the coffee shop. Another. Me inside the grocery store checkout line, unaware someone was behind me with a phone pointed at my back. Ice filled my body. These were all taken in the last 2 weeks, she said softly. We believe whoever it is followed you from your family's home after you left. Detective Harris leaned forward. And the night of the crash, we believe they intended to strike when you were in the car. My fingers trembled violently. But I wasn't home. They canceled my birthday. I left early. Exactly, he said. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. So, when they saw you weren't in the car, Officer Daniels continued softly, they went after your family anyway. My stomach twisted. Nausea crawled up my throat. What do they want from me? I whispered. Detective Harris exchanged a look with the officers. We're still trying to figure that out. But we believe the texts you received were from this same individual. I shivered. I felt small. Exposed. And the person in the hood today? I asked. We're running footage from the stores nearby, Daniel said. We'll find something. Jake, silent until now, finally spoke. She's not staying in that apartment anymore. The detective nodded firmly. You won't be. Not tonight. My breath caught. Am I going into witness protection? No, not exactly, he said. But we have arrangements to keep you somewhere safe. Where? I asked. He hesitated. Then, with your family. My heart dropped. No, I whispered. No. I can't go back. They canceled my birthday. They ignored me. We know, he said gently. But right now, they are the safest place for you. We will post officers outside the house. You won't be alone. And if we can get you all under one roof, it increases our chances of protecting you and catching whoever is behind this. I looked at Jake, hoping he'd say something, but he just squeezed my hand. Emma, he whispered, your mom asked about you last night. Tears burned my eyes. Your dad, too. They thought you were angry with them, but they still waited to see if you'd come. I shook my head. I don't know if I'm ready. Detective Harris leaned forward, voice steady but firm. You're not going back because of forgiveness. Or family. You're going back because someone is hunting you, Emma. And we need to protect you. I swallowed hard. Everything inside me screamed no. But everything outside of me, danger, footsteps, texting threats, brake lines cut, whispered yes. I took a shaky breath. Can I at least think for a moment? The detective nodded. Of course. But not long. We need to move soon. I closed my eyes. I saw my mother crying in her hospital bed, my father pacing, Lily's scraped knee, my empty chair at the dinner table. The night they canceled my birthday. The night I packed my bag. The night I left. The night everything broke. Then I saw the hooded figure staring at me from across the street. My eyes snapped open. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll go." They stood. Jake hugged me tightly. "I'll follow your car," he promised. The officers led me toward the back exit of the station for safety. The sun was warm on my face, but my skin felt cold. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't the homecoming I expected. Not even close. But as we walked toward the car waiting to drive me back to the house, I swore I'd never return to. Something inside me whispered, "This is only the beginning." Because that night, I would go home, only to find out that the person stalking us was much closer than any of us ever imagined. And the moment I stepped through that front door, the next extreme event was waiting. The police car drove slowly down the familiar street, and my stomach twisted tighter with every passing mailbox. The maple tree in front of our house came into view first, its branches bare now, like arms reaching for something that wasn't there. I swallowed hard. Coming back felt wrong, like stepping into a memory I no longer fit inside. 2 squad cars were parked near the driveway. Officers stood near the porch, talking quietly. Everything looked smaller somehow. Dimmer. Officer Daniels walked beside me as we approached the door. "Remember," she said gently, "you're safe. We're here." Safe. I wasn't sure I believed that anymore, but I nodded anyway. Inside, the air smelled like peppermint tea and hospital disinfectant. My mother sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. Her face was pale, and her hair messy, like she had run her hands through it all night. When she saw me, her eyes filled fast with tears. "Emma," she whispered. Her voice broke something inside me. I hadn't expected to feel anything. Not after the birthday cancellation, the years of being overlooked, the way they always chose Lily's tears over my voice. But seeing my mother like that, soft, tired, and so human, bit cracked through my anger. She stood up slowly, like she didn't want to scare me away. I didn't know what to do. So she opened her arms, and my feet moved on their own. We held each other for the first time in months. No big speech. No dramatic apology. Just holding. Quiet. Real. My dad came down the stairs next, limping a little from the accident. His forehead was bandaged. His eyes were red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. When he saw me in Mom's arms, he let out a breath like he'd been holding it since the day I left. He touched my shoulder gently. "I'm glad you're home." Home. It felt like a strange word in my ears. Heavy. Complicated. Before I could answer, the officers ushered us into the living room where they had set up a temporary command area. Detective Harris stood near the window, staring out into the yard like he was hunting shadows. When he turned to us, his expression was tight. "Lock the doors," he told the officers. "Nobody comes in or out until I say so." My heart lurched. "What happened?" I asked. He motioned for us to sit. "There's something you all need to hear." We sat, my parents on one couch, me on the armchair closest to the hallway, officers standing guard at every exit. The tension in the air felt like a rubber band stretched too far. The detective took a deep breath. "We reviewed the surveillance footage from the area around the coffee shop," he began. "And we found your stalker." My heartbeat banged in my ears. He placed a printed photo on the coffee table. I leaned forward, breath caught. And my stomach dropped so hard it felt like gravity snapped. The face in the photo was one I knew. Not a stranger. Not a shadow. Not the man in the hood. It was someone familiar. Someone from our life. Someone who had been in our house. Smiling in our pictures. Laughing in our kitchen. Someone who should have never been watching us. My breath trembled. My voice barely came out. "That's Mr. Dalton," I whispered. My parents jerked their heads up, their eyes wide with shock. Mom pressed a hand to her chest. "That can't be right. He's our neighbor. He helps mow the lawn when Mark works late. He brings Lily gifts on her birthday. He's been obsessed with your family for more than a year," Detective Harris interrupted gently. "And based on what we've found, he became fixated on Emma specifically." A sharp chill crawled down my spine. "Fixated?" I whispered. The detective nodded. He followed your routines. He tracked your schedule.
He took pictures of you.
He monitored when you left the house and when you came home. My father looked sick.
Why?
Harris hesitated, then continued. It appears he developed an unhealthy attachment to your family dynamic. When Emma turned 18 and became more independent, it upset whatever fantasy he'd built in his head. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. The room started to spin. If Emma wasn't home on her birthday, Harris said slowly, he thought the family was trying to break apart. So, he wanted to punish whoever he believed was the cause. A silence fell so heavy I could hear the faint hum of the fridge. He didn't know Emma moved out, the detective went on. He thought the reason she wasn't in the car that night was because someone in the family hid her from him. My father whispered, horrified. So he cut the brake lines because he thought. Yes, Harris said softly. He blamed all of you. My mother sobbed quietly. My head felt full of static. My hands were numb. A man who lived only 2 houses away. A man who'd waved at us. A man who gave my sister candy. A man who smiled at my parents across the yard. He had been following me, watching me,
targeting me,
and nearly killed my entire family because of his twisted fantasy. I need air, I whispered shakily, standing up. Detective Harris reached toward me quickly. Emma, don't go far. Stay where the officers can see you. I nodded, barely hearing him. My pulse thundered in my ears. I walked to the sliding glass door and stood there, staring out into the cold backyard. Everything felt unreal. Like this wasn't my life. Like this wasn't my family. Like the house behind me was full of ghosts wearing familiar faces. Outside, the maple tree swayed gently in the wind. A place I'd climbed as a child. A place I'd cried behind when Lily got all the attention. A place where I made birthday wishes no one remembered. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and whispered, "Why me?" I didn't expect an answer. Instead, I heard footsteps behind me.
Soft.
Hesitant. It was Lily. Her big hazel eyes were swollen from crying. She held a stuffed rabbit in her hands, one I gave her on her 8th birthday. She looked up at me, lip trembling. "I'm sorry, Emma." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. She took a shaky breath. "I didn't know he was watching us. I thought he was just nice. I didn't know you were hurting. I didn't know I was taking everything. I'm sorry." My chest tightened. I knelt down and pulled her into a hug. "It's not your fault," I whispered into her hair. She pressed her face into my shoulder and cried harder. We stayed like that until Detective Harris called gently from the living room. "Emma, we have one more update." I stood up slowly, still holding Lily's hand. "What is it?" He glanced toward the window, then back at us. "We went to arrest Mr. Dalton this morning." "And?" Dad asked, voice unsteady. Harris exhaled heavily. "He wasn't home." A cold wave washed over the room. "He left town sometime during the night," Harris said, "with packed bags. And his phone turned off." My mother clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Dad muttered, "Dear God." "And one of our officers found footprints in the snow outside this house early this morning," Harris added quietly, leading toward the backyard. My heart stopped. The room went completely still. "Meaning?" my father asked. Harris met my eyes. "Meaning we believe he came here, to this house, sometime between midnight and dawn." A chill ran down my spine so strong it felt like ice water. "He knows Emma came home," Harris said. My breath hitched. "He knows the police are involved."
He paused,
then added, voice low, "And he's not planning to stop." My hand tightened around Lily's. My parents looked terrified. Officers in the room shifted. Alert now, ready for action. Detective Harris walked to the window, slowly pulling the blinds 2 inches apart. His shoulders stiffened. He whispered, "Oh no." Every officer turned. "Everyone," Harris said, voice sharp now. "Stay away from the windows." My pulse spiked. Mom covered her mouth. Dad shielded Lily. "Detective," I whispered. What do you see?" He slowly lowered the blinds, then turned to us with a look I will never forget for the rest of my life. "He's here," Harris said quietly. He's in the backyard.